Well, welcome to this fourth and final Project Edward Speed Management webinar for 2025. The topic is one of the most critical and challenging areas of road safety, as speed remains a defining factor in both the likelihood and severity of collisions. Therefore, effective management is central to achieving safer journeys for all who use our roads. Today, we're joined by a distinguished panel, bringing a range of expertise and perspectives. Paul Keasey will outline the strategic context for speed management. Sean Maher from Quartix will discuss how technology and data can support effective fleet management. Adding an all-important human component to this will be Raymond Williams, who, following a career in North Wales Police as a family liaison officer, now works for Slater Gordon, and Dr. Rob Torok, fingers crossed if his sound's working, a consultant in emergency medicine at Dorset County Hospital and a pre-hospital doctor on the Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance. So those are the contributors. Let me just say the webinar is being recorded. We are delighted that it's this, as the whole series has been, supported by Red Speed International, and their support is greatly appreciated. And when the recording is done, we'll pop it into the Spotlight Showcase section of the Project Edward website. Use the chat by all means. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the period, and if you have questions or comments, we will refer to them during the course of the webinar. Good, so that's a quick overview. Before we start into the questions and answers then, Paul Keasey, could you just give us a little introduction to yourself and what brings you onto this webinar?
Good morning, James, and good morning, everyone. Paul Keasey. I was responsible as a senior officer for NPCC for Operations, Intelligence and Investigations, known as NERPOI colloquially. I did that for over 10 years. I was also the commander at Central Motorway Police Group. So at the time, it was three forces, Staffordshire, West Mids and West Mercia, and incorporated all elements of road policing, both from disrupting criminality to the Fatal Four, Regional Collision Investigation Unit, etc. I've also had direct responsibility for UK as a representative across Europe, and also done multiple operations at a national level in regards to the structure and governance of road policing.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just got a message from Rob Torok, so we should get him in a short moment. Sean Maher, please, could you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Sean Maher. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. I work for Quartix. Been with Quartix for 18 years, and we are primarily a telematics provider. So my role within the business is to provide our service on a business-to-business front, providing our customers with insight into their vehicle activity, management, and safety. So I suppose to explain us in 3 words, we're looking at your utilization, your compliance, and as I say, the safety of your vehicle fleet. And the whole idea is that in the event of you needing to know what's going on with your fleet, our portal will provide you with the clear understanding of what's happening, and be able to give you a very clear overview as to how your operations running, and obviously helps us identify risk. So that's what we do.
Thank you, Sean. Raymond Williams, an overview of your career to date, please, sir.
Well, yes, but good morning. From rural North Wales. My background initially was road transport management, and then transited to the world of road safety. I was one of the youngest road safety education officers in the 90s, and proud to be part of the Think branding that still exists today. Left there then to join North Wales Police, a variety of roles there, including neighbourhood policing, and then the last 11 years of my career as a senior investigating officer or a lead investigator, looking into serious and fatal road traffic collisions on the roads of North Wales. And for most of my career, I had a volunteering role as a family liaison officer, as an FLO. And in brief, that entails basically turning up at somebody's door, totally unexpected, to give them the most terrible news that they're probably going to get throughout their lives, to let them know that they've lost somebody close in a road traffic collision, and then support them through the investigation to the conclusion at the end, be that a coroner's inquest or a court case. So that's me in summary, and good morning to you all, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Now, fingers crossed, Rob Torok will be with us and can hear us, and we'll be able to hear him. Rob, communicate with us if you can.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for the invite and thank you for having me. Just give me a thumbs up. You can hear me, James. Yeah, great. Yeah, brilliant work you're doing with Project Edward, and thank you both to the contributors today and the audience for your interest. I've been an emergency medicine consultant for just over 20 years. I've been a pre-hospital emergency consultant doctor, so working pre-hospital with Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance for the last 13 years. Got really interested in road safety and prevention about 13 years ago, and just want to add my voice and influence to just change the weird acceptance of the tragedy and suffering and pain and cost that the nation accepts. And I see it as a dynamic between individuals at the public level and drivers, organisations and politicians and the government and leadership. There's a really weird self-sustaining balance that we just need to crack out of, particularly with regard to fleet and fleet drivers and fleet management. I think there is an opportunity to have some effect here, because it is a higher risk sector. 14% of traffic is related to work. It's not supposed to be fleet, it's work that the paper talks about. And yet they're involved in a third of the deaths and a quarter of the collisions. So a high risk area of road users.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rob. We'll come back to you. I'm going to whiz through with a few opening questions to each of you in alphabetical order. And for our purposes, that means we start with the letter K, and K is for Keasey. Paul Keasey, tell us about the most significant challenges that you faced in speed management during your time leading the Central Motorway Police Group, and how did you address them?
Good question. First off, I 100% agree with what Rob has said. I think there needs to be a step change. I think there needs to be realisation of the impact of speed in relation to collisions, and especially regarding serious and fatalities. With all that in mind, when I was in charge of Central Motorway Police Group, the biggest challenge to us in regards to tackling speed, which I actually thought was probably the most prominent out of the fatal four, was, if I'm honest, capacity. Our resource deployment and the coverage of the area, the sheer size that we had to cover, was a real challenge to us. What that also created was, when we did initiatives, when we did operations, etc., it often created what I would call event migration as a problem, i.e. it just shifted to somewhere else. So we were constantly having to look at it and deal with it and tackle it and understand where the likelihood of that was going to be. I don't think that's changed in policing. I think the capacity levels of road policing has shrunk for a variety of reasons, but that is the same across all policing. But the impact upon that is less interaction with drivers to influence things such as their behaviours. So that behavioural insight is really important to actually change what drivers think is acceptable regarding speeding. What I will say is, one of the things I observed straight away is, we won't enforce our way out of this. We've tried that for decades in regards to it. Enforcement is a strong aspect of speed management, but under no illusion, my personal view is, and this is the great thing when you retire, you reflect, is it's the behavioural change that has to happen at all levels. And I think this links into what Rob has just talked about from a government perspective, setting the right culture and environment, whether through legislation or not, all the way through to the driver, and especially regarding businesses and fleet operators. What is the culture you're engendering within your drivers? How do they act when they're on the road? How do they create the safest environment they can, knowing that accidents will happen, which is why the words were changed to collision in regards to it. But this is the hardest nut to crack, because most people speed. If you go one mile per hour over the speed limit, you are technically speeding. What I'm really interested in, though, is the inappropriate, the excessive. And that is what we really targeted when we were at CMPG, to get the high risk offenders, what we would deem them to be, or the people who are likely to create the most collisions because of the nature of their driving, and actually target them through like an intelligence-led approach.
And how successful was that? How effective is intelligence-led policing in sort of having that impact on speed enforcement against those sorts of people during your tenure, of course?
I think it's challenging. I think our systems don't help us. We're 43 forces. We have 43 standalone systems. Do they really talk? The one thing I would say since I've left the police and do some consultancy now in private sector is the ability to integrate what I would call as information or intelligence from multiple sources. So whether you've got telematics, whether you've got data from businesses, whether you've got the police information and the systems they use, that integrated intelligence platform is essential. Override that with the likes of A&E data, medical data, DVLA, DVSA, merge it all together to give you almost like a single source of truth to identify the different segments, the high-risk drivers, the ones who may need some additional medical support, the business community. How do we make sure that, you know, they're able to do the job in the safest environment whilst also contributing to road safety in its all? How did we do? I think we did our best, if I'm honest. I think we maximised the use. But there was things like, from a multi-agency, when we worked as a multi-agency approach, it was a much more successful. And I think that was demonstrated through work we did like across Europe with things like Trivium, where we had multiple data sets from multiple countries that allowed us to understand the risk of the driver, but also associated that to the style of driving they were performing on UK roads. And I think that was really essential to us.
Paul, thank you very much. We'll come back and continue that conversation, but let me now bring Sean Maher into this. Sean, just give us a chapter and verse. What does the law actually say when it comes to speed management and the responsibility an organisation and its fleet manager have for the safety of their drivers and other road users?
I mean, the first key point is that the law, it's down to the employee to be obeying the road speeds, of course. They're the people in control of the vehicle at any particular point. I think the issue around this from the organisational point of view and the fleet manager's perspective is how they can then, and it's what Paul's just said, really, it's about behavioural change. So, you know, if I'm caught doing 80 miles an hour, that's me caught. It's points on my licence and the fine. But ultimately, I'm also putting Quartix as a business at risk because I'm obviously driving my vehicle inappropriately. And that's not just breaking speed limit, that's inappropriate speed on rural roads, as we talked about before, as you know, James. But ultimately, the law states that the employee is responsible, but the employer has a duty of care and needs to ensure that they're bringing in certain points to ensure that they're managing their road risk of their employees. And the way we feel you do that is by bringing in reporting through telematics and making it very clear and showing the fleet manager or the health and safety or the risk manager where that risk is, who are the highest risks, but also bringing into play the driver. I think that's key. You know, Paul made the perfect point. We can put every single rule in place that says you've got to do this, you must do that, you must drive like this, you mustn't do that. But it's getting that behavioural change, and it's ensuring that the driver is buying into that project. So from our perspective, from the telematics point of view, we want to ensure that drivers are empowered to understand the data that we're collecting and see it for themselves and be able to genuinely see where that risk is coming from. I mean, I would imagine Paul, Raymond and Rob have got far more experience about what this looks like out on the road. You know, we are merely a telematics provider that provide you with the facts. You guys are, as Raymond has said, you know, you're the guys that have to go and knock the door of a family to explain what's happened to one of their loved ones. And as I say, taking it back to the telematics element, we are able to give the information to the employee and to the employer as to where that behavioural change needs to come from. So ultimately, the responsibility sits with the driver. That's where the fine would come. That's where the points will come. But as the employer, you obviously need to ensure that you have policies in place that really sort of bring safe driving and sensible driving and appropriate speed into the day-to-day operation of your fleet. That's how we see it.
Now, you've said you've been with Quartix 18 years, is it?
Yeah, 18 years. Yeah, long time.
Is that long enough for you to observe changes in the kind of in the metrics, I suppose, in the sort of reading the kind of the way fleet managers behave and react to information, and are they very different now from what they were generally?
100%. I mean, I started selling telematics 25 years ago, when it was relatively new, and I think there's been a significant shift since, I think, probably around about 2017, 2018, where it's become more. I mean, look, when you say you work for a telematics company, most people go immediately, "Oh, it's Big Brother." It's not that anymore. I think that idea of this is something that's there to spy on the driver. Those ideas, I think, really are very much a conversation from over 10 years ago. What I'm starting to see more and more when you're sitting in front of fleet managers, it's not just the fleet manager that comes to that meeting now. It will be health and safety. It will be risk. It will be HR that are joining the conversations around, well, how do we bring into play into our business a strong culture of safety? So very much so. I mean, you're obviously aware, James, that we launched a product called Safe Speed Database way back in 2016, which was designed for the young driver insurance market, which looks at contextual speed of a road. When we first started showing that to the fleet businesses in 2016, it was kind of, well, they're not breaking the speed limit, they're not doing anything wrong. But I think that culture's changed to the fact that we can say, well, look, this might be a 60-mile-an-hour road, but we're proving categorically that 60 miles an hour is not a safe speed to drive it at. And I think that attitude shift is really starting to come into play now, where we have customers that are looking at the contextual speed scoring rather than the scoring against somebody doing 40 and a 30. People are taking 55 miles an hour on a blind bend as seriously as breaking the speed limit, because typically we can say, well, look, that blind bend at 55 miles an hour, you're within the speed limit, but your mean average flow of traffic going around there is actually only 30 miles an hour. So there's been a definite shift around how people are looking at this data and looking at speed and trying to change that behavior from where it was 18 years ago. Categorically, back in the day, it was, all I want to know is where are they. Now it's, I want to know where they are, and I want to know they're safe, and I want to know that the public at large are also safe, because our vehicles are driving in a sensible manner around the streets and roads of the UK. So yeah, definite shift around safety and speed.
For you, Dr. Rob Torok, not enough of a shift, I guess, from your experience as an emergency medical consultant. How does excessive speed continue to influence the severity and types of injuries you see after road crashes? Perhaps things have improved. Maybe the protection that a vehicle provides is better than it was a couple of decades ago, but the behaviour change hasn't sort of kicked in. So tell us what you have to deal with and why speed management is so important for you.
Yeah, thank you, James, and thank you to those previous speakers. I mean, there's so much already in some of the topics that you've touched on, Paul and Sean. I'd like to come back to a bit of that in a tick, if I may. As far as what we deal with, at the roadsides and in these collisions, it's absolutely brutal. You wouldn't want to hear a vivid description of what we have to deal with. It's war zone type injuries that you're seeing on day-to-day roads, and this is affecting the general public in their day-to-day lives and people's families and friends, and it's just absolutely diabolical that it's continued to be accepted. There's a couple of points I'd just like to I mean, as far as safety of the vehicles goes and our understanding of the safe system and that side of things, yes, the understanding has improved. Yes, vehicle engineering has improved and they're safer, apart from the one critical element, which is the driver and driver behaviour. And you would expect over the last 10, 20 years to have seen a reduction in the collisions and severity of injuries and deaths purely from the engineering output of vehicles getting safer. Why haven't we? I think the main reason we haven't is because people are human and their behaviour looks at the world around them, copies what other people around them are doing, and overcompensates for what's going on. They feel safer, so they drive a bit faster. We're more cocoons than we used to be, and that effect is overcompensating all the additional safety features that are being built in. A couple of things I'd just like to really highlight on the speed and that message, because speed is absolutely the key. inappropriate speed, excessive speed, and breaking the speed limit. And they're three slightly different segments of the same puzzle. So Paul was particularly emphasising the excessive speeders, and as far as police enforcement goes, it is right to target those, and they carry an excessive risk, and they're an easier target to target audience, if you like. But don't let that distract you from what we've learned in the last sort of 5-10 years from analysis of what's going on, is that the numbers of people that are driving a little bit too fast for the conditions and or exceeding the speed limit by 1 or 2%, 1 or 2 miles per hour, the number of those people going that little bit too fast really massively increases the risk for everyone, because so many people are driving a little bit too fast for the conditions or exceeding the speed limit a little bit, a lot of the time. So then when there is the collision occurs at higher speeds, the forces are higher, the injuries and risk of fatality are higher. So it's such an intricate problem. I think one of Sean's comments about the sort of big brother perspective on things, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of resistance to accepting or even demanding that we should all have dash cams and telematics on our vehicles, that the police or authorities should be able to review at any time if they have due cause to. I don't understand that. We live in a world where people in their homes allow themselves to have all sorts of information gathered, by various companies and the tech companies, computer companies, and they share their data and they know what's happening and they don't really care because it's convenient for them and they're getting some sort of advantages from it. When we talk about roads and road use and vehicles, people are very resistant to it because they're worried they're going to be spotted or seen doing something wrong, or that it's going to be inappropriately applied. But how weird is that? Because the benefits of people being watched and knowing they're being watched and knowing that their data can be reviewed at any time with due cause could save lives, because it would change, I argue, it would change how people behave. If you know you're being watched all the time, you know you could be reviewed any time, then you know that there is that capability, and it will alter your behaviour. People would drive a little bit slower, a little bit more considerately. And really, I think at government level, that should be being driven as a requirement for the benefits of road use. These concepts of, it's Big Brother and we shouldn't be allowing it, they belong 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Look at the rest of life and what people accept. Re-intrusion and sharing of data upon that road, and we could reduce these deaths and collisions significantly.
It's still quite a hard sell, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but why? What other aspect of life does the public and politicians accept? 1,600 people dying every year. That's 16,000 people dead in the last 10 years since I've been actively involved and before. 128,000 seriously injured each year, and to the economy, to Britain's economy, 54 billion a year. If we could just prevent, these collisions and things, and that's without getting to the human side of it. The human and the moral duty of care we have to each other. There's something very strange about just the way that people perceive what they do in their vehicles and what's acceptable on the roads and what the law and the government and policy should do, that they don't accept in any other walk of their life. And it's a really hard nut to crack. I don't have the solutions, but by golly, we need something like the Road Safety Investigation Branch, or someone to really focus on it, being given the authority and responsibility to turn this around and crack this nut.
Rob, thank you very much. Let me bring Raymond Williams in, former family liaison officer, now working for Slater Gordon. Raymond, thank you for joining us. I know you've taken time out from a busy conference that you're attending, so we appreciate your time. Just tell us, how did excessive or inappropriate speed factor into the road incidents you would have dealt with as a family liaison officer? How did you communicate its impact to the bereaved families that you had to go and meet?
Yeah, well, first of all, as the previous speakers have mentioned, a lot of this is down to human error, isn't it? And as human beings, most of us believe that we are almost perfect. And when you go to driving, it's the same, isn't it? It is a shame we need speed limit at all, because if that perfect individual driver did actually exist, we would all drive at responsible, appropriate speeds. And that's the word, isn't it? The appropriateness of the speeds. So coming back to the question, when you actually knock on somebody's door to give them that terrible news, speed is a factor in, I would say, certainly more than half of the fatal road traffic collisions, but quite often attached to other things of the fatal 5 as well, or the fatal 4, depends what force you work with, by impairment and lack of concentration and various other things. But telematics, as Sean mentioned, few of us know that most modern cars now have got their own built-in telematics. And as a lead investigator, it was very, very frustrating to find out. And there was a steep learning curve for me when I started that role, because we had a couple of collisions involving a death. And we knew, you didn't have to be a scientist or an expert to work out that speed was a part of it. But we wanted to work out roughly what that speed was. And you didn't have the luxury of 2 cameras that we could work out the average speed between both. But we had the telematics in the vehicles, and most car manufacturers, they want between £5,000 and £10,000 to provide information to police forces investigating fatal collisions, which I think is wrong. It should be available free of charge, because what you get then are some senior investigating officers in charge of the checkbook saying, oh, right, we won't pay Kia or Audi or Ford or whoever for that information. And it's wrong, because, the speed, when the airbag comes out, in most modern cars now, I don't have a percentage, but there's clear data available that can tell you at the point that airbag was deployed, the car was doing 91 miles an hour. And why should police forces and investigators have to pay to obtain that information? And sometimes that was a hard pill to swallow when you had to explain to families, yes, we believe it was excess speed because of the road markings maybe the car had left, or a bit due to other factors, or the witnesses that perceive the speed to be high. But, that information from telematics is there. Why can't we get it to be part of that investigation freely and cheaply?
That's a good point, isn't it? Who owns the data in your car, Raymond?
Well, yeah, there's probably the company manufacturers. I wouldn't have a clue unless I'd been an SAO, the amount of data that engine, the ECU sort of holds in vehicles. And it's magnificent. Some even have cameras that you're not even aware of, inside the things. And it's amazing. It was certainly an interesting, part of my career in the police to find out all these things that we didn't know existed in vehicles. But it's just a shame that it's there, but you have to pay for it, and sometimes, very, very large amounts of money to get that information. From the manufacturers. I'm not talking for people like Quartix, and I'm sure Quartix would share the information, or simply the companies that run them would. And coming to Quartix, it's a very small world, isn't it? Because the coach company I drive for now and again, it's Quartix they use as telematics in the vehicles, and they've only got 6 coaches. They're all very nice ones, and as drivers, we always look at the driving style. And it's sometimes when you press that button on the app and you think, "Oh, what's it going to be today?" But you're hoping it's over 90% in the positive. And if it's under 90, you take it personal. Think, "Oh, my driving style wasn't as good as it should have been today." So that's a bit of a banter between the drivers, Sean. To be honest, sometimes if there's 3 coaches going to the same destinations, we'll compare our driving styles from Quartix, which can only be a positive things in terms of speed management.
Right, I'm going to put something to the 4 of you now, and I'm going to come to Paul Keasey first. Rob Torok highlighted his disappointment that we are still having this sort of antipathy to Big Brother. So here's the point. Decisions viewed as unpopular, such as reducing speed limits, adding cameras, restricting car use, the Big Brother camera in the cab, can be opposed by the public at the proposal stage, regardless of who advocates for them. But research suggests that resistance can diminish after implementation as people begin to recognize broader societal benefits, such as improved safety, health, or environmental outcomes. Any thoughts on that, Paul? How do we sell those longer-term benefits and maybe even take away the decision-making, the policy implementation from politicians whose own sort of overriding need is to be popular and therefore re-elected? Long question. Oh, can't hear you, Paul. Sorry.
So really quickly, 100%, we need to do it. That's the first starting point. I want to be unambiguous. 100% agree with Rob, Sean, and Ray regarding why wouldn't we use the insight that can be provided to save lives? Well, that's the bottom line. If we can save lives, that's the whole concept of Vision Zero, etc. So one of the roles I did in policing was I was the MPCC lead for digital intelligence and investigation. It was exactly the same ethical considerations that we came across about using AI and large language models. What was interesting was 10 years before I started that role, no one used online banking. I wonder how many people on this call today don't use online banking. And the reason, because at first there was distrust. They were going to allow people access to the accounts. They were going to be able to read things, etc. Now, because of the need, because it was advantageous to us, we now use online banking as secondary. We use apps as secondary. We use technology. We want to use technology. It was previously mentioned before this webinar started. How great has Teams been? Well, that only came through because there was a need, and it got accelerated through COVID. Now, I think there's an absolute need to reduce the volume of fatalities and serious injuries. That is my starting point. So how do we do it? Well, sometimes you can mandate it. Sometimes you can work with suppliers. But the first thing is we've overcome the biggest problem. The solutions are already out there. So a car is just now 3,000 plus little microchips on wheels that happens to convey people. When you then start talking in the future about autonomous vehicles and the journeys, etc., they will all already be regulated by technology. What we need to do is find a way with government, etc., to accelerate that and actually make it, some of it mandated, that information will be shared, the need and requirement. So I'll give you an example. We talk about post-collision, but look at Rob's job. He turns up to the scene. He's at an area of, like, as he would say, almost like a conflict zone. Wouldn't it be great? And we can do this. This is the worst thing. We transpose the data from the car to know what the collision was likely to have been at speed, what type of impact, so he can put that into an informed judgment to help save the people's lives at the scene. So it's things like that. I think the government needs to be stronger regarding it. I think manufacturers need to take some more corporate social responsibility, and the information is available. So let's get it out there.
Rob, what do you think about that? What do you think about getting community groups to implement local road safety changes, non-political actors enacting road safety policies, legal powers for agencies to change road rules without the need for politicians? Any of those resonate with you, Rob?
Oh, virtually all of them resonate. And the difficulty is that there's so many different aspects to it, that there seems to be a dynamic that all the relevant parties seem to be waiting for someone else to do something. So absolutely, we need the individual drivers and road users to be understanding how serious this is and be lobbying for their local communities to have road safe groups, and to be lobbying their politicians that this is important and we do need movement on it. We need the politicians and leaders and writers of policy to be bold and courageous and do the right moral thing, regardless of whether their public is demanding it, because it is going to save their lives. In the same way that happened for seatbelts, in the same way that happened for not smoking in public places. There are parallels here, and it's just difficult to understand why we're in this impasse and this stalemate. And what was it? Was it 2019 or 2022 when the government said we're launching the Road Safety Investigation Branch, and then for whatever bureaucratic reason that hasn't gone forwards, and they've kind of watered it down at the moment to a focus on autonomous vehicles. Now, the focus on autonomous vehicles itself is interesting because for those to work properly, they are going to need to have in them real-time telematics telling all the other vehicles where they are so they can coordinate and avoid each other. So this is coming whichever way it comes and however it comes. So why don't we bring that forwards and say, right, all vehicles from now on, as they get an MOT, need to get a data recorder and GPS fitted in them that can be transmitted and can be accessed by investigators like Raymond and his descriptions of the post-event things. It's really interesting as to why this isn't happening, and we can each play our part. And this webinar is talking to fleets and fleet operators. We can all play our part. That's a high risk area, and as employers, we have to have duties to our employees and to the people that are going to be in contact with the vehicles that are in our fleets. Is there a way that we could use this and for business sense? I know that business runs off money and profit, and that's what keeps the world going in that sense. But is there a business out there or a fleet operator out there that wants to take this forward and say, right, all our vehicles are going to have dash cams 360, and we're going to make them available to the police all the time, so that if there's any incident in the vicinity of one of our vehicles, the police will be able to have that sort of data. And we're going to have policies that encourage our drivers to behave and drive safely and have appropriate rests, and not just about the legal limits, about appropriate speeds. As Sean said, the quartiles and the appropriate speeds for the conditions. And we're going to monitor it, and we're going to feed back to our drivers how well they're doing to keep themselves and the community safe. And could that be a bit of a branding and publicity tool for a company that helps get them advertising and business, but also helps this sort of cultural problem we have around road use and safety and prevention?
Paul Keasey, you have your hand up, so let's bring you straight back.
Yeah, apologies for hogging it. I just want to pick up on a point that Rob said about societal. If it's from policing, Peelian principles were based on the benefit for society, not the individual. And that is what we're talking about. Every individual driver may think they're great, but collectively we're creating risk within the road network. The other point from Rob just said regarding businesses, absolutely. They have a key role to play regarding fleet management. Even if it's down to a personal level, things such as we prosecuted under health and safety and corporate manslaughter, because you have a legal responsibility in regards to it to provide that duty of care, both to your employee, and then after that to other road users accordingly. And the last bit I would say, I just, so for example, Red Speed International, they've just changed the whole the mantra from being this provider of speed cameras. So you could see that as purely detection and actually as a curse to motorists. But listen to their strapline. Their strapline now is safer roads, smarter solutions, protecting communities. They want to be seen, and they are actively doing it, as enablers for road safety. If we can prevent, people from speeding, etc., then actually the road will be a stronger, safer environment for everybody. That includes my child, my wife, my family, my friends, everyone who works with us. It's just a societal issue, which links back to the point for policing. It's all about the society. Individuals may not like it, but if the greater benefit for society is such, then it should be done.
Thank you, Paul. Rob said at the beginning of his most recent contribution that it feels like we're waiting for someone to do something. So that someone could be Sean Maher from Quartix. Sean, talk to us then. Reflect on your thoughts regarding strategies to increase public acceptance of controversial road safety policies.
Look, you guys, Raymond, Paul, and Rob have got far more experience around the reality of road incidents. I am just a mere salesman selling telematics, but the key
you're an expert. You're not an also ran. Please, let's just make that perfectly clear. Stop belittling yourself.
The key point here is that there is always resistance to bringing in a telematics product to the workforce. But I do think that people realise very, very quickly the advantages that telematics can bring. The amount of times we've gone into a location, we've been told that there's been a bit of an uproar from the drivers. We've had to sit and we've had to explain why we're doing it. And typically, we find very early on in the equation there will have been a complaint made against a certain vehicle or driver, and the telematics are able to dismiss that, disprove it, in the event of a collision, say, well, look, okay, you say we hit you at 30 mile an hour. We didn't. We actually only hit you at 4 miles an hour. That allows us to mitigate claims. I mean, the key thing here is, as you've all said, if every single vehicle in the UK had a Quartix unit in it, one, I'd be very happy. But secondly, more importantly, you know, we'd have a clear understanding as to what vehicles are doing, where they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And I think the resistance to be bringing in a telematics product normally sits, I think, with people's fear as to what is it, what does it do, and how will it be managed actually. And I say to any company that are bringing in a telematics product, bring it into your driving policy and openly say what you will be doing with the data, and have the driver buy in so that the driver knows what that data is doing and how it looks. Just to sort of say, if you think an average van on the road is worth around £30,000, the cost to implement a telematics system over the 3 years to the value of that van is 0.01%. It's a no-brainer. You've got a £30,000 asset being driven around with probably another asset, which is the human, probably worth a similar amount of money plus the goods. And we're able to tell you that that vehicle is compliant and safe based on the data we can produce through the telematics. It is genuinely a no-brainer as to why you just wouldn't put a system in your vehicle to make sure that your employees, the public at large, and you as a business are safe and able to understand where you sit with your duty of care and corporate responsibility. So, yeah, I mean, I do get on my soapbox a bit with this. There is no real reason why anybody should feel threatened by bringing in a telematic system unless you're doing something you really shouldn't be doing, because we'll tell you. But I think the buy-in has to come in from the employer, ensuring that the employee is on that same journey with them and understands why they're bringing it in, and it's there to protect them as much as anything. So, yeah, I suppose that's where my head comes down on this one, folks, to be fair.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'm just going to bring in we've got a couple of comments in the chat. Andrew Curry is asking, do any of the panel think that the media should routinely report whether casualties were wearing seat belts? I don't know if anyone has anything to say on that. Paul, is that something that you would comment on?
It's an interesting question. I think the media can be a real ally, but it can also be detrimental to the messaging. You know, something that Sean just said is, it's a really positive that we need to be showing that capturing people doing the right thing as much as the opposite. And what happens with the media sometimes is just concentrate on the one element, the one occasion, etc. My personal view is I think everyone has the place. I don't think our reporting mechanisms are strong enough. So if that is part of the question, yes, I think we should be able to identify areas where speeding is really problematic. But from the multitude of different elements of it, do I think we should name and shame? I'm not a great advocate for it, because I think people need to be educated. And I think by naming and shaming, you often put people almost underground. People won't then actively get involved in the right thing to do. So it's a bit of a funny one with the media. But what I will say, just to probably even contradict it slightly, is social media, influencers, the media itself will change people's behaviors. It's how you control that narrative that's really important.
I mean, interesting to say, Paul, sorry to butt across you there, James, but when we're introducing this into companies, we actually say to them to focus on the good rather than the bad. Because if you're rewarding good behavior rather than lambasting bad behavior, people tend to want to be in. It's like anything. If you work on a league, nobody wants to be bottom of any league. If you're a football fan, everybody at the moment, if the Wolves fan, is probably feeling rather depressed at the moment because that's where they are. But the key point is, if you turn that around and you start focusing on the good, and you start to show the good elements of the data, then I think it brings that behaviour that other people then want to get the praise and the recognition and the kudos for being safe, being fed, far better improved, etc. So going to what you said, Paul, yeah, it's about making sure that you reward the good rather than just bash the bad.
Just to say, obviously, Andrew asked a question about seatbelt, didn't he? So totally agree, because obviously seatbelt is one of the fatal five, and sadly, even though it was brought in the early 80s as compulsory, I would say the vast majority of people in the daytime, from my experience, tend to wear them. Some of the van drivers decide not to for various reasons. But the collisions I dealt with, and it was proved that the individual that died sadly wasn't wearing a belt due to their intoxication, or they'd been out for the night, and the last thing they think of doing is the clunk click every trip. Ended up the car having a collision and the person ejected it from it, sort of thing. So to answer Andrew's question, definitely. And when it goes to coroner's inquest, of course, that is one of the things the coroner will cover, as to how the collision occurred and why did that person die, and if the evidence shows that it was due to not wearing a seatbelt on that occasion. The press, they do widely cover coroner's inquest, especially in North Wales where I live, and it is sort of, it assists people in persuading people still how important the use of seatbelt is. But nowadays you can hardly go anywhere, the thing will start bleeping in your head, won't it, and you have to put your belt on, which is also good. But I think I'm right in saying that most of the collisions we have where people die because of not wearing belt are because they're either intoxicated in the back of the taxi, or that sort of example. But clearly it does need to be publicised. Anything that causes a crash needs to be publicised so that people can learn from, sadly, other people's mistakes.
Thank you. I'm going to a question here from Graham Millward. Thank you. An interesting point about telematics, he says, and the fear of drivers being watched. Would it be a fair comment to say that those more accomplished drivers know precisely what is acceptable in terms of legalities and driving with due care and attention, but for many drivers this is more of a hazy area which creates the fear factor? I appreciate speed is a bit more clear-cut. So, Sean, you've had a moment to reflect on that?
Yeah, I suppose that comes back to your driving policy, isn't it? And what you're going to be utilising the data for and how you're going to be managing it, I guess. I mean, I suppose, anybody that initially has a telematics system installed, yes, it changes behaviour, because the moment you have it in, you kind of know that at any point somebody could be watching what you're doing, I guess. But I think it's how it's communicated out. And as I said, I've been selling telematics for 25 years. I don't know one customer that employs a person to sit staring at a telematics system all day watching vehicles drive around. Typically, telematics is used when there's been an incident to go back and assess what's gone on, and then typically the key data around utilisation, start finish times is reporting that comes in a scheduled approach. Most people are only going in to look at the actual live system in the event that there's a problem that needs to be investigated. I think it might have been Paul that said it earlier on. And Rob as well. To be fair, wherever we are, we're tracked. I mean, most of us have probably got a phone that's telling you where you are now. Find My Friends or whatever else, whatever the equivalent is on an Android phone. But we're typically, wherever we go, we're being something is tracking our movement. But as soon as we put it into a vehicle, especially company car, it becomes very emotive in the fact, well, it's my car. What are you doing? Why are you keeping an eye on me? But as I say, I think it just goes back, Graham, to how you communicate that through a driving policy and make it very clear what you're going to utilise the data for and when it's going to be used. But typically we find that a lot of the time it's being used is to protect the operative rather than the other way around.
I just jumped in there.
I was just going to ask you to jump in, Rob. Please do.
Good timing. Yeah, I think the interesting thing with the telematics, and Sean has touched on it, is that all modern vehicles have this telematics. The motor manufacturers are getting all this information anyway, and it's in the vehicles. Where we're behind is the public's understanding and acceptance of that fact, and the legislation that allows sharing of the information that already exists with the appropriate authorities in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. And it's incredibly frustrating that we have serious and fatal collisions, and Raymond touched on it earlier, and then the police close roads and spend a lot of time in investigating it and have to put a lot of manpower and special, kit in and expertise to try and understand exactly what happened, where, which angles, which forces, which speeds. And yet, those very same vehicles that were involved probably have half that detail in them already, that could save all that time, could allow the roads to be opened, and the driving public aren't kind of aware that it's already there, or they don't make that link. It's already there. Just say yes. Let's use it for the better, to preserve life, to prevent pain and suffering, and save the nation billions of pounds. It's
Rob, you have said about your interest in road safety over the past, I think, 15 to 18 years. Have you felt a lone voice, or have you felt the ability to collaborate? Are people listening? Are the right people listening to what you're saying? And is it resonating with other road safety initiatives that are carrying on? I mean, do you feel part of the road safety world doing, in trying to make these things happen, or do you feel on your own?
Oh, I don't feel on my own at all.
Good.
No, there's lots of us. The road safety community has done some marvellous work, and there's been an amazing research and advances because of the activity that various charities, organisations, individuals do. So I completely applaud them. Where the frustration comes from me is that despite all that activity, despite all that time, manpower, investment, cost, we haven't changed it for the better significantly at a government and national level. And the whys and the wherefores of that are interesting. But the fact that 10 years of road collisions and the injuries and deaths, they've been pretty static for about 10 years. There's been no significant improvement for 10 years. The fact that government, the fact that policy hasn't responded to that, the fact that we're living in an age where we've all got, a lot of people have got mobile phones that have got the tech on that would really help and turn that around. That's my frustration. So it's not that I'm a lone voice. There's loads of people saying exactly the same as me. It's that it's not translating across to the individual road users demanding that something is done about this when it's their relative or their loved one or their friends that are involved, or will be the next ones to be involved. And government and policymakers aren't stepping forward and saying, this is our moral duty, our responsibility to protect the public. We are going to do something about this before another 2,000 people die. That's the frustration. It's, where do you go with that? I'd love to know the answer.
Well, look, we're coming towards the end of this webinar and the end of this series, but it's absolutely not the end of the conversation. We've got so much that we need to continue as once 12 o'clock comes and we sign off, because that doesn't mean a problem solved, sadly. But I'm going to go to Sean. I've written down a few pointers here for all of you, but I'll start with Sean. We're looking for strategies to increase public acceptance of controversial road safety policies. So, how do we go about selling the societal benefits? How do we look at delegated authority, specific legal powers, devolved powers that can take it away from politicians and put it in the hands of agencies? How do we change behaviour, I suppose? What are your thoughts? And because we've got to start somewhere. We have started, but we've got to carry on the conversation.
I mean, obviously, I'm dealing business to business, and I think fundamentally, our role within what we do is to ensure that, and this is pretty basic, but it's the base fact here is that our product is designed to ensure that people are out operating safely in any environment they work in. So typically for us, our role is to ensure that all employers get their employees home safe every single night. I was talking a couple of months ago to a company who were talking about all of the equipment that these guys have to carry to make sure that they're safe when they're at their job. They've got the right equipment, etc. But nobody ever thinks about that journey to and from work. Typically, that is the most likely time that somebody working for a living will be involved in an incident. I can remember many years ago, Mark Cartwright from Now Highways England doing a stand-up telling me that the 3 most dangerous jobs you'll do in the UK was a deep sea diver, a coal miner, and driving. And that stuck with me. I heard that nearly 20 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. So really, for me, it's the employer having the policies in place to make sure that the employee gets home to their family every single night safe and well. And that's it. And yes, these guys will probably talk about more about the different government agencies out there. But for me, the responsibility is with the employer to ensure the workload of the employee means that they're out there, they're safe, and they get home and they're there to do the next day's work and be with their family at weekends. That's basically what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Well, Raymond Williams, I'll come to you. What joint efforts could police, legal professionals and campaigners take to ensure that the voices of families affected by speed-related incidents shape future speed management strategies? What do you think for that?
Right. Well, it's all down to partnership working, isn't it? Nobody can treat this problem on their own, and that's been tried sort of over many, many decades. But I'd like to turn that on the head and tell you a little story, if you don't mind, James, before I finish. I'm conscious of the time. It'll take a minute or two to say, but
you've got 60 seconds, Raymond. You have 60 seconds.
Okay. We were all in the 80s. There was a song, "The Children Are the Future," wasn't it? I'm not going to burst into song. However, I was approached by a head teacher of a primary school asking if I'd go there to tell the children not to give them a row about not to play chicken on the road. So I decided I'll go there, and I told him I'll teach him how to play chicken safely. And what we did little experiments on the yard as to the stopping distance of a car doing 30 mile an hour, which, as we all know, I'm sure is 23 metres. So we then went out with the children on the side of the road with a speed gun to actually measure the vehicle speed on the road that came past their school. And the average speed was 36 that morning in the 30. So fast forward 2-3 weeks after that visit to the school, I had a phone call asking if I was this person going around schools telling kids to hit their parents. And I thought, goodness me, no, I go down schools. And what had happened that day was that the parents was driving, and they told me on the phone, over 40 mile an hour in a 30, when the little child, who'd been part of my project at the school, gave him a slap across his face and told him to kill your speed, Dad, not a child. And you know what? 25 years on, that young lady was a probationer with North Wales Police, and she actually made a point of seeing me in the canteen in HQ and says, "I remember you coming to our school when I was about 10, she says, and I slapped my dad across the face and he phoned you to tell you off." So how bizarre and interesting is that? But clearly the children are the future, and if we can get into the minds of children very young and educate them, that could affect the behaviour for the future.
Thank you, Raymond, I think. Paul Keasey, please, last words on increasing public acceptance then of controversial road safety policies. We've got to get that over the line.
Yeah, we've got to review the whole aspect of speed management. I can't think of anything even from a medical position where we know the main 4 contributors, causation factors in regards to collisions, and we haven't resolved it. Part of the issue is to understand what the problem is. Speed, to me, is the number 1 out to the fatal 4. I think public perception of enforcement, for example, needs to be about fairness in regards to it. I think there needs to be in national safety initiatives rather than basically what is perceived as a local revenue generator. And ultimately, there needs to be consistency. There is no national consistency about how it's applied, how it's approached regarding speed enforcement. And I would personally mandate it. I'd have a national approach rather than a local to actually tackle the issues full on.
Thank you very much, Paul Keasey. Rob, we can now see you. 59 minutes and 17 seconds into the webinar, we can see you. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. Our work on speed management cannot end here. I hope this series opened eyes, but the next step is to open doors to new conversations, fresh partnerships, and meaningful action. So Project Edward will commit to carrying this energy forward into 2026. How will we do it? Practical workshops that explore innovative speed reduction measures, community-led road safety initiatives, and data-driven enforcement strategy will play our part. Together, we need to aim for safe speeds becoming more than just a distant prospect, but the foundation for every journey. So for this webinar, for this series, thank you. Please stay in touch. This is just the start from our point of view. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.